Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. Really excited for today's video as we discuss the worst futures in the NBA post-NBA draft. And I'm very excited for this one because not only are we looking at the teams that I think are not very well positioned long-term, but we're taking more of a long-term approach in this one about teams that, yes, there's going to be some teams right now that lose more games, say going into 2024, maybe even 2025, but this is more of a holistic picture of, hey, not how bad is this going to be, how bad is this team going to be over the next 2 years, but how bad is this team going to be over the next 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. And there's a lot of projection here. So you might disagree. I'd love to hear your disagreements down in the comment section. Let me know what teams you think I missed, what teams you think shouldn't be on this list that are. And let's jump into it right away here with my number 3 worst future, and that is the Los Angeles Clippers. Now for them, I do find it hard to fully believe that this team has a terrible future because they have something very, very important, and that is an owner who is willing to break the bank in Steve Ballmer. He was such a fantastic change of scenery and change of pace for the Clippers when he replaced Donald Sterling as the majority owner of the Los Angeles Clippers back over a decade now ago, which is just crazy to think that it's been that long. But under Steve Ballmer, the Clippers have been a really well-ran organization. They're a really good franchise, really good team right now as well. And of course, that's headlined by those 2-star wings in Los Angeles, both Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. But I think it's very obvious to everyone that those two guys have not taken this team as far as the original expectations were, which is an NBA title team. Now, I do think it's important to note that this hasn't been completely a bust. You might roll your eyes at what I'm about to say, but they did make the first Western Conference Finals in franchise history. So given that, it's already been a big step forward from where this franchise has historically been. I think the branding of the Los Angeles Clippers is significantly further ahead today than where they were a decade ago. And that's in part due to Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. But I do think as these two guys age, the health is going to be even more of a concern. You just can't really invest in Kawhi Leonard or Paul George at this point and feel 100% confident that they're going to be able to string 82 games together. And then after that, they're going to be able to string possibly 28 games together in 4 postseason series. I just don't see that very likely. And then you look at what the Clippers already owe. And then I think the one issue for me here with the Clippers is I think this team's really good. I think they're very well coached. But with how competitive the Western Conference is, people like to label it a weak West. I think it's a very deep and talented and pretty competitive Western Conference. And the Clippers might find themselves as the odd man out in one of these next couple of years. And if that's the case, this whole thing's a disaster. The expectations went from title team to potential missing the playoff team. And without some of their draft picks, with some swaps out the door to Oklahoma City, you know, the pick swaps, the draft picks themselves aren't the end of the world, but the more they watch Shai Gilgeous-Alexander grow into potentially a top 5 player in the world right now, the worse you have to feel as a Clippers fan. So for me, I've been reluctant to include them. I think that their management's very smart, but I do believe now the loss of Michael Winger goes a long way as well, and potentially this team not being as great as they once were. Transitioning into my second worst future for the long haul, and that's the Chicago Bulls. This team is very easy to bet on as a poor future, and it really all hinges off of one decision, one trade that Arturas Karnisovas made when he became the GM of the team, and that was trading for Nikola Vucevic from the Orlando Magic. And you look at the direction of those two franchises post-trade, Orlando's been nothing but ascending, and Chicago has been nothing but descending for the long haul. Now, Chicago did have a fun, frisky year in there, but I think a lot of this hinges off of Lonzo Ball's lack of availability. I think he was the missing piece from this team as they just weren't healthy this past year. And I think you look back to the first 50 games or so of Lonzo, DeRozan, Caruso there in Chicago, this team was really dynamic. They got up and down the court quickly, a lot of good decision makers, quick kind of processors. And without Lonzo, who's really the epitome of that for Chicago, this team lost some of that offensive identity that made them special. And they also lost a key defensive component for what really held their defense together, both Ball and Caruso together. Those two went down with injuries in similar timelines back 2 seasons ago now for Chicago. And I think since then, this team hasn't been the same. Lonzo Ball, of course, has not come back to play. Sounds like he's going to miss this entire next year as well. And just given the fact that Vucevic and DeRozan aren't getting any younger, The Bulls owe a first-round pick to San Antonio in 2025. I don't really feel good about what this team currently has. I don't feel good about where they're going. They have to make a free agency decision on Vucevic. So for that reason, I'm a little lower on the Bulls' future in general. And I just think this team's going to have some struggles, some difficulties when it comes to really putting the core that they have together and back into the playoffs and winning a series. I think is a real long stretch for them where they might be stuck in mediocrity for quite a while because of that one big bad Vucevic trade with Orlando. Moving now into my number one team, the team with the worst future in the league, and that's the Phoenix Suns. Now, if you want to debate me, I definitely recommend joining our Discord. I had some really good, passionate discussions with some of the Discord users in there about Phoenix's future, and I think this is really the important team to talk about when it comes to long-term future. This team's going to be good this upcoming season. You have Kevin Durant, you have Devin Booker, and now you have Bradley Beal. Those are three certified killers, guys who can get shots off in the mid-range, all good three-point shooters as well. I think you can argue that this team has some of the most top-end talent in the NBA, especially with DeAndre Ayton there. You have four really good players. Three of them could be considered all-star level players, I would say. And then two of them I think are going to be Hall of Famers in Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. So you're looking at a really good cast of players, a really strong grouping of players. But outside of that, there's a lot of question marks. And with the new CBA, it's going to be really difficult for Phoenix to add on any pieces. And it's very important to note that they already gave up those 4 first-round picks to Brooklyn. And you can say what you want about that. Giving up Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, 4 firsts, that's a really steep price to pay. They also gave up Jay Crowder, who turned into 5 seconds. They've given up a ton of actual player compensation in that deal. But you also look at other components of that, other fallouts from that as well. And you look at the Bradley Beal trade specifically, the fact that they gave up 4 pick swaps in that, one that they already owed a pick swap to, so now it's a 3-team pick swap. That's ridiculous. For a guy who has a no trade clause, you could have held out for anything. And I've heard people argue, well, it's not a must trade clause. Washington had zero interest in keeping Bradley Beal. They looked at getting off of Beal's contract as a huge plus for the organization. So the fact that they were able to swindle not only 4 first-round pick swaps out of Phoenix, which I do think by the years 2026 maybe, but definitely 2028 and 2030 could be real premium assets going forward, similar to what we saw between Boston and Brooklyn back in the day, what ultimately delivered Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown to the Boston Celtics. We could see the Phoenix Suns set up in a very similar situation where the Suns are essentially the old Brooklyn Nets. Kevin Durant is the Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce of the deal. Joe Johnson is the Bradley Beal component, and overall, this team is just not very well set up. And people are going to say, oh, well, the Suns have Devin Booker. Yeah, the Nets had Darren Williams. It's a very similar situation. I think the Suns have effectively screwed themselves to a point where Matt Ishbia might have a new rule named after him in the NBA called the Ishbia rule, something I floated on Twitter, where when you're a new owner coming in, you're not allowed to make trades for the first 6 months of your tenure. Should be an important rule, because when you look at what he's sent out versus what he's brought in the first 6 months of his ownership of the Phoenix Suns, it's not very good. The Suns team went from a very young, well-balanced roster who, yeah, maybe they weren't going to win a title, but with 1 or 2 small moves along the way, you could maybe position yourself to get there, to a team now that is really indexed on the next 2 seasons. And if they don't win one this year or next year, you look at the long-term future of Phoenix and perhaps 2 of the worst trades in recent history for Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal. And yes, I would go that far to say that that's a possibility here, because if it sets up Phoenix for 7-8 years of being one of the worst teams in the league, it's an absolute disaster. So I think that's something we do have to keep our eyes on. I think Phoenix is the worst future in the NBA because of it. They've given up too much in their deals, specifically the Bradley Beal trade, and choosing to go for a 3rd star instead of depth was a really questionable decision for me, and I think one that Phoenix is ultimately going to end up paying over the long haul. I think they're just going to have a lot of difficulty in making more moves with the new CBA. It's going to be very, very tough for them. So I think the Suns, in my opinion right now, the worst long-term future in the league, and I don't even feel that good about their chances of winning a title within the next 2 years either. Thank you guys all so much for watching. I really do hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe for more future content. Check out that Discord, link is in the description for that. Go give us a follow on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok as well. Links are in the description as well for those platforms. We really do appreciate you guys. Let me know down in the comment section which teams have the worst future in the NBA moving forward. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Don't forget, we're going to be streaming during the NBA free agency period, so make sure to come out and support the channel during that time as well. And then that way you'll stay on top of all the 2023 NBA free agency news. Thanks again so much for watching, guys, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.